Hey, we're here to make an amendment, or a video about the 9th and 10th Amendments. And to do that, we're going to have a couple things. I always start with my trusty Sharpie, but obviously you've got a pen, pencil, use whatever you've got to use. I take a yellow. Now, yellow colored pencils are pretty normal, but I like this little pen. And I'll just get a green colored pencil. That's the only colors I'm going to need today. And colors are always important when we do doodle notes because they help us recognize and identify things in those notes. Colors have meaning. Yellow means caution, slow down, just like a stoplight. Green means go, go, make transitions, make connections. And red usually stands for conflict. Just like if you run a red light, boom, you get an accident. That's a pretty big conflict. Okay, let's start with the 9th and 10th Amendment. Okay, we've already done videos on the 1st through the 8th, and we know the first 10 amendments are all part of the Bill of Rights. Let's begin by folding our paper. Here's our paper, and we're going to fold it in half, only because that's what I told you to do. Okay, now this is what's going to get tricky. We're going to fold this paper into thirds, and you're going to kind of have to eyeball it. You can kind of do one of these deals, like roll it up like a donut or something and kind of start smashing, adjusting. I don't care how you do it. Just get it into roughly thirds, like that. Okay, not perfect, but hey, it works out pretty good. And then I'm going to take one of these, just one of these, and I'm going to fold it over like this. So when I open up, it's in the thirds. I'm going to take one end and fold that crease. And that's it. Now I get out my paper and I've got everything I need to create a success story here. Okay? So I got two small ones, two big ones, and I've got two small ones and two big ones. Perfect. Just out of curiosity, I want to make sure it's reading right. Is this backwards? I can't tell. Well, we'll find out. So let's put this over here. Let's see what this says. Does that look right? Oh, we are upside down. Holy moly. Now we got good to go. Okay. Either way, it shouldn't matter. All those folds should have been the same. Now, sometimes you just feel like things are upside down, or you're inside out, or you're turned backwards, and that's exactly what I was. All right, now here we go. We're going to start at the very top. We're going to make our graphic organizer. See right here, this very, very first center point? I'm going to make a dot right there. I'm going to make a dot right there. I'm going to make a dot right there. And then I'm going to connect those dots just like I'm playing the game. I'm going to go all the way down here. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go all the way across here. I'm going to go all the way across here. And I'm going to stop right there. Okay? If I do more, I'm going to ruin something I'm going to do later on. In fact, let's just go ahead and go down and get it over with. Down here on these two corners here, this is what I'm going to build. I'm going to start here. I'm going to draw an arrow that goes just like this. Or a curve, I guess. I'm going to come over here to do the exact same thing. There you go. And now I can go ahead and connect these over here. Now we have our graphic organizer all built up, ready to go. Now let's start with the title of this graphic organizer. And just like all the Bill of Rights videos, we're going to name this the Bill of Rights. And that's kind of important because we want to make sure that we're staying consistent. We know these notes are connected to other notes. And when I write Bill of Rights, I want to put that in a little kapow box because that's how we do things. Because when you see that, it should go kapow in our brain. the knowledge punch. I'm going to add a little yellow to that bad boy because yellow reminds us of slow down, be cautious, pay attention to what's going on around you. And because this is a continuation, I'm just going to add the term continued. And this is our final continuation of the Bill of Rights because the Bill of Rights stop at 10, and we're going to cover 9 and we're going to cover 10. Now, if you don't remember what the Bill of Rights are, you should definitely remember every time you think of Bill of Rights, you should think first 10 amendments. And that's my little think aloud cloud because it's what I'm thinking about when I think of the Bill of Rights. And you should also be thinking about this. This is really important. If you don't know what an amendment is, we're kind of in a mess here because you really don't know what we're talking about in general. So I'm going to put this over here. And as many times as I have talked about this, amendment are, I'm going to put this little think aloud cloud here, but I'm not going to put the rest of that sentence here. I'm going to leave it open-ended because I want you to think about that. And I want you to write down what you think the amendments are. Okay? You put the definition there. Think about that real quick. Okay, so I'm going to leave that blank, and that's on you. If you don't want to keep on working on it, that's going to be for a problem. But we're going to go on to the 9th and 10th. We're going to label these two 9th and 10th Amendment because that's what we're going to do. And you don't have to get as fancy when you put your 9 down. But since I feel like a fancy pantsy, I'm going to put 9th in a cool block letter. And because I know it's an important term or an important number, or the concept is really important, I'll put that in a little kapow box. I might as well label what it is. And I'm going to come over here and do the exact same thing with 10. Okay, and since they're in kapow boxes, guess what I got to do? Add a little yellow. Now, we haven't even got to the hard stuff yet. We're just doing the coloring. The hard stuff is when we start talking about what these amendments are, because I'm not going to lie to you, they're not as cut and dry as the other ones. You kind of got to think about a bigger picture here. When you talk about the Second Amendment, which is the right to own guns, you talk about the First Amendment, we talk about the right to free speech. Fifth Amendment, you have a right to not incriminate yourself or put yourself in jail. You've got cruel and unusual punishment. You've got lots of different things. They're pretty easy, cut and dry stuff. But when we talk about the 9th and 10th Amendment, there are a little more deeper concepts because, they were worried. When I say they, the founding fathers or a lot of people who needed to support this Constitution were really worried about how much the Constitution left out. And they wanted to make sure that just because it wasn't listed, it wasn't important. Because there were a lot of things, there's just too many things to write down in that Constitution. So they really wanted to make sure, they wanted to cover all their bases and have some language in there that was going to protect them. And when I say them, I mean the individual people, individual states, folks who want to make sure that their rights are trampled, and they didn't have a voice in the conference to make sure specific things were not listed. So this is important. Let's start with the 9th Amendment. The 9th Amendment, we're going to call this a safety net. Now, if you don't know what a safety net is, that's one of those things that, like the trapeze artists, when they're walking across, and they don't want to fall, well, a safety net's there for a reason. It's there to catch you, and it's there to catch anything that maybe got left out. And so they want to make sure that rights that weren't listed are still protected. So it makes sure that rights that were not specifically mentioned in the Bill of Rights are still protected. Now, fancy word, these are called unenumerated rights. In fact, you know what? I think that deserves a think aloud cloud. So if you get a right that maybe is not specifically mentioned in the Constitution, you still have unenumerated rights. That means rights that were not specifically written down, but you still have those rights. And there are lots of examples. I'm going to write the word examples over here. Let's see if I can do it upside down. Look at me. If you could do this, then you earn a pat on yourself, a pat on your own back, I guess. I'm a little tongue tied. It's been a long day. So there are some specific examples. For instance, one of those rights, the right to travel. You can pick up and go and move from place to place. The right to vote. It's not specifically mentioned those first to 10 amendments, but you have that right. You have the right to keep your own secrets. Right to keep personal matters private. That's what we're going to say here. And I'm going to tell you, one of the best examples is if you ever have to go to a healthcare place, or you have to go to the hospital, and you ask for information about a parent or a family member or something like that, they'll quote something called HIPAA laws. And HIPAA laws are there to protect you so your medical information does not get out to people that it shouldn't get out to. So you have to literally sign a waiver. Now, if you're under 18 and your parents or your guardians, they have access to that. But as an adult, nobody can look at my records unless I've given them prior authorization to do that. That's it. That's a big deal. And people get fired for breaking HIPAA laws. Those are one of those things that are protected. I have a right to that stuff. And something else I'll throw out, and this is just a handful of examples. Decisions about your own health care. Now, this for many years, and I could be a little off on this, but I'm gonna tell you right now from memory, I believe the abortion rights that people clung on to for a number of years before we just recently had some changes with our Supreme Court and some decisions that changed the outlook on how abortion's treated on a national level. But decisions about one's own health care were equated in some ways to abortion. And because it was tied to women's own bodies and their own right to choose and their own health issues and that type of thing. So That's a debatable thing. I don't want to get into abortion, but I will tell you the decisions about women's health care. These are how these topics are really complicated and really confusing, and sometimes they're controversial. So these are all examples of unenumerated rights. There's many more. We're going to stop there, okay? Because we're going to shift gear over to the 10th Amendment, okay? And the 10th Amendment's real simple. This is also a catch-all, okay? I'm going to call it a catch-all. And you know how I used that net before? Well, this is a different net. Okay. What am I trying to catch? Well, I'm trying to catch everything I can. That's what I use that net for, right? So a catch-all, this means any powers, this is really a protection for the states, any powers not specifically given, that means directly, specifically given to the federal government, that means the U.S. or national government, in the Constitution. I know I'm making this longer than I need to. Are reserved for the states. So if you've ever been to a movie theater and you walk in that movie theater and somebody's already bought their tickets and you want to sit in the front row or you want to sit in the back row, but those seats are already reserved, that's what reserved means. It's already set aside for that particular group. Well, when we talk about powers, if it's not directly given to the U.S. government and the Constitution specifically mentioned, the U.S. government can declare war. Okay, that's a right that goes to the U.S. government. Fine. But the things that aren't mentioned, they are reserved, they're set aside for the states. And there are examples of this. Okay? There's plenty of examples. For instance, if you are at a certain age and you want to go get a driver's permit, states make their own decisions about how old you have to be to get your learner's permit, what those restrictions are going to look like. For instance, my kid got a permit to drive back and forth to school. Even when she didn't have a full license, she had a school license. Well, that was a process she went through based on Iowa rules, not U.S. government rules. If you go to Missouri or Nebraska or Kansas, they're going to have a different set of rules. Hunting permits. Some people will travel just to Iowa to hunt during certain times of year because we have certain hunting opportunities other states don't have. Same thing with gun permits. Same thing with lots of permits. And something else states do, we regulate our own schools. We set the number of days schools have to go to school. We set the kind of curriculum that schools have to follow. States have those decision-making powers because those are rights that are reserved to states because they aren't specifically given the federal government. So you have a nice little graphic organizer here breaking down the 9th and 10th Amendment, which is the continuation of the Bill of Rights, which are the whole first 10 amendments. And the Bill of Rights was a conglomeration of these different ideas that they really wanted to make sure were protected because the original Constitution did not. So as a compromise to pass the Constitution, the people, the framers who built the Constitution said, we'll make these first changes to that Constitution as soon as it becomes law. and they followed their word, and they got all these through, and all of these are part of our government now. They're part of our society. So you got the 9th, which is a safety net that protects certain enumerated rights that aren't specifically mentioned, and you got the 10th Amendment, which is kind of a catch-all, and those reserve rights to the states that aren't specifically given already to the federal government. And that's it. Good job. Way to go. Take a quick look. If you have questions, well, as always, go to your Google machine, go to your teacher, go to your parents, go to a textbook, go to any place else that's viable and intelligent, and get some more answers. Great job. Thank you.